who is food storage for? Is it just for folks that are already on a piece of property and have a garden and all of this stuff?
No, food storage. Well, I like to ask the question, how many people eat?
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, seriously, if you eat, then food storage is important for you.
Right.
It's important for everyone, no matter where you live, no matter, how much money you have. Food storage is important, and it can save you money if you plan ahead and you think it through and have a system in place.
Yeah. One thing that we've run into a lot when we talk about food storage is the folks that get the all-knowing look on their face and say, oh, I'm good.
We're good.
We've got food storage. We've got a good pantry. But really the question is, do you have a plan? Because if you don't have a plan, then you're totally shooting from the hip and anything could happen. And so the real question is, do you know how much of each of those items your family eats in a certain period of time? And do you know how much you currently have? And unless you know those two pieces of information, then you don't have a plan and you don't know that you have food storage.
The Ready Life, into the country.
Hi, I'm Nick Meisner.
And I'm Lisa, his wife.
Welcome back to the Ready Life podcast, where we show you how to make your home and family as independent as possible for basic necessities like water, heat, food, and the power that most of us depend on for these things. And in this week's episode, we're going to be talking about food storage, which is a really important topic that, yes, it gets some attention, but I think that the attention that it gets is kind of disorganized and haphazard. And so we're all about having a plan and trying to make this something that is practical and workable. And honestly, we've seen so much of the food storage methods that consist of buying a year's supply of freeze-dried food, stick it in your basement, and then let it sit there for 15 or 20 years. Mm-hmm. And that just doesn't work real well for a couple of reasons. One is that it's very expensive to do that. To buy a whole year of freeze-dried food, expensive freeze-dried food, that costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
Number two would be that not everyone likes freeze-dried food for everything. There's some things that we like that are freeze-dried.
True.
But then there's other things that we don't like that are freeze-dried. And when you buy these year's supply of food packages, they don't always have what you and your family like to eat. And so you might start munching away at it, but then when all is said and done, you're going to end up with a bunch of food left over that you don't want to eat because you don't like it. And then number three is eventually that food is going to go bad. And if your method of food storage is to just buy a bunch, let it sit, and then, for the apocalypse or whatever it is that you're stashing up for, then that's what's going to happen with it, is you're just going to end up with a bunch of food sitting there and going bad.
That's really more of an emergency preparedness technique,
right?
Which is why years ago we decided to call ourselves sustainable preparedness. It's because we were advocating something that was very different than just more of an emergency, let's just have a backup plan sort of thing. We were advocating more of a lifestyle, a way of living that was more prepared. And so, we're coming at this from a more sustainable perspective of being prepared.
A lifestyle of preparedness.
A lifestyle.
And so it's what we call the rotating pantry method.
That's right.
Which consists of eat what you store and store what you eat. And it's that simple, really, because you're simply figuring out what are the items that we like to eat, that my family likes to eat, and then we're going to store those items. Mm-hmm. And then instead of buying a bunch of stuff and just letting it sit there until it goes bad, we're going to be eating from our pantry. We're going to take the whole concept of a pantry that every house has. Every house has a pantry of some size. Nowadays, they're pretty small pantries, but
Cupboards.
yeah, exactly. But every house has a pantry, and we're just taking that concept and expanding it, where instead of just having a little bit of food for a few days or a week, you've got a larger stash of food, but it's still those items that you like to eat, and you're eating from them. You're eating the ones that have been sitting there the longest and resupplying them with newer items so that it's constantly rotating and nothing goes bad.
That's right, going to the grocery store every other day or once a week. But, it's interesting talking about food storage because, some people think, well, I guess with that description of food storage, everyone to a certain extent does a little bit of food storage. We don't go to the grocery store every single meal to get our food.
Well, there may be people that do.
Okay, well, I hope not because that's a lot of work. Anyway, I don't like shopping, so that just sounds like a drudgery. But why would long-term food storage be important for people?
Well, for one thing, there are times of the year when you can't grow as much or everything. And so even if you have a garden, even if you have a pretty sustainable homestead, that only works for a certain period of the year. Unless you're in a tropical climate where the climate is the same year round and you can just be constantly growing, then you're going to have times of the year where you're not able to grow all of the stuff that you can during the summer. And so then, yes, it's true, you can have a winter garden in almost anywhere. Even up here, you can have a winter garden, but you're more limited in what you can grow in that winter garden. It's cold hardy crops, the greens and these kinds of root crops and things like this, but you're not going to be growing a well-rounded meal in your garden year round. And so if you want to eat, if you want to have a truly sustainable homestead, you're going to have to store food during the harvest season to get you through the winter until the next harvest season. That's for even a independent or sustainable homestead. But then you enter somebody who maybe they're not in that position yet. Maybe they're in a transitional location where they haven't found their homestead yet. Even they can gain a tremendous amount of independence from practicing food storage, because now if they have a month or 3 months or 6 months or whatever amount of food on hand, they are not in a desperate situation for food if the trucks stop running. They've got enough. I mean, I think about 2020 when we would all go to the grocery stores and see the shelves going bare, and the trucks were still running then, But what happens when the trucks are not running in that kind of a situation? Food storage is going to be important for everyone. And it's a beautiful thing because food storage is one of those things that you can practice anywhere. Anybody can do it.
And it makes me think of a comment you made the other day when we were talking about food storage planning. You said food storage is better than having money in the bank. It's almost like an emergency fund.
It is part of our emergency fund.
Yeah, it is actually. Because if you run into a crisis, a family crisis, maybe something happens and you lose your job or you can't work for some reason, like you have that food storage plan set up, plus you've got your emergency fund. And so now you're not going to have to be dipping into that emergency fund to fund your meals because you've already got that and you can start, dipping into that.
Right. So it's better than money in the bank, really.
Yeah, it is. And not only that, but I know for us over the years, having a food storage system in place has saved us money because when I go to the store and I'm spending $20 for a large bottle of oil or 2 bottles, and then I come and it's $40 for a little while, I'm like, that's okay. I don't need to buy oil right now. And I just wait until the price goes back down and then I replenish the oil that I've been using in my food storage plan when the price comes back down.
That's right.
And nuts, I've seen that so many times with the nuts. Our nut storage has fluctuated dramatically over the years because sometimes the price of nuts is so sky high, I just can't buy them. And so then I just start using into our food storage until the price of nuts goes down. And then I go and I replenish my food storage.
That's
so
awesome.
It saves money that way too.
That's right. And I know we mentioned this earlier, but who can do food? Who is food storage for? Is it just for folks that are already on a piece of property and have a garden and all of this stuff?
No, food storage. Well, I like to ask the question, how many people eat?
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, seriously, if you eat, then food storage is important for you.
Right.
It's important for everyone, no matter where you live, no matter, how much money you have. Food storage is important, and it can save you money if you plan ahead and you think it through and have a system in place.
Yeah. There's things that you can't do in some locations.
True.
You may not be able to put up an off-grid solar system in some locations. You may not be able to put in a wood stove in your house in some locations.
True.
And things like this, or a garden. If you don't have a yard that you can do a garden in, you may not be able to garden in your location. But anyone can store food.
That's right. Start with your cupboards.
Right.
Add some shelves to corner of your room.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I mentioned this earlier, but one thing that we've run into a lot when we talk about food storage is the folks that get the all-knowing look on their face and say, oh, I'm good.
We're good.
We've got food storage. We've got a good pantry. But really the question is, do you have a plan? Have you planned this out? There's a parable in the Bible that talks about counting the cost, the king that counted the cost before he went to war. And this is really what it's all about, because if you don't have a plan, then you're totally shooting from the hip and anything could happen. And so the real question is, do you know how much of each of those items your family eats in a certain period of time? And do you know how much you currently have, how much food of each of those items that you currently have? And unless you know those two pieces of information, then you don't have a plan and you don't know that you have food storage.
Yeah, that's so true, because I can actually answer that question. Well, I could answer that question about 5 years ago. How much applesauce does our family eat in a year? It was about 150 jars. Of course, we had two little ones that pretty much subsisted on applesauce. And I remember 2 years ago, we did up about 150 jars roughly, and it lasted us almost 2 years. So our kids are getting older. They're not eating applesauce all the time for everything. And so we need to go through and I need to go through and factor out exactly what our home is consuming, because we're consuming more food overall, but less applesauce. And so I need to adjust my food storage plan to make up for those changes and that difference.
That's a good point, that when you have major life changes, then it's a good idea to go through and reanalyze, because how much food you ate a few years ago isn't necessarily what it's going to be now.
Yes.
And so, yes, that's actually something that we are going to be personally doing over the next month, which brings us to the question of, how do you actually do this?
That's right.
Starting tomorrow, in fact, this is why I say we're doing it over the next month, is we're starting our first accelerator in the Ready Life Academy starting tomorrow. And if you're listening to this on January 2, then it'd be tomorrow, the 3rd. We are starting this accelerator we're all going to work through it together, this whole process of making a plan and what you're about to describe.
Yeah, so what I do is I start by making a menu, just a simple, plain old-fashioned menu. And I mean, we've been saying this for years, right? If you make a menu and you stick to it, it actually can help save money. Well, if you make a menu and then you stick to it for 2 weeks, just 2 weeks is all you need. So that way you've got a good idea of how much food your family actually eats and what your family actually eats. Because I know when I first sat down and wrote a menu out for my food storage plan, I kind of went a little elaborate. Like I was going to do lasagna and then this and then that and all this fancy food, which is just great. You know, I'm going to do a Mediterranean diet and we're going to do all of these crazy recipes. And that's what I put in my menu. But that's not actually what we really eat every day. You know, granola and blueberries and I'm picking on my husband here. But no, it was too much work, all of those fancy foods and everything. And so I just had to sit back and say, no, wait a minute, what do we actually eat? You know, spaghetti, or my kids like mac and cheese, or we do burgers. You know, whatever it is that your family regularly, routinely eats, that's what you put on your menu. And then from that menu, once you've actually genuinely gotten the menu, then you eat it for 2 weeks just to see how much food you actually eat. I thought, when I first did this menu, I thought we ate more than we actually did, which was good. But you need to know how much food you actually eat instead of just assuming this is how much food you think you eat. Then once you go through that menu, as you go through it, write down, keep track of how much food you're actually eating.
So when you're cooking the meal, when you're cooking it up, you just jot down notes of, you know, this much of this, which I know it sounds like a hassle, but we're just talking 1 or 2 weeks.
Yeah, you only got to do it for
theoretically,
a short time.
You could do this in 1 week, but the concept behind 2 weeks is that it gives you more variety.
Yeah,
right?
And for people like me who don't like to eat the same thing every day.
Yeah.
So,
but you could do it in one.
Yeah,
you could do a 1 week menu if you wanted to shorten this whole period.
And then, and then actually see how much of that meal you ate. Like I thought we ate more than we actually did. But when I actually set it on the table and we consumed the food, and then I looked to see what, we didn't eat as much as I thought we were eating. Then you compile that list of all the foods that you eat and you multiply that out.
Times whatever period you can afford.
Yeah, maybe you're just going to start with 1 month.
Or 1 week.
Start with 1 month's supply of food or 1 week.
Supply of food.
And then just slowly build up to 3 months or 6 months.
Whatever your budget can handle. And then the point is to be steadily growing it, you know, so start off with what you can, and then maybe each month you add another week of food storage. So instead of getting 4 weeks of food, you get 5 weeks of food, or whatever the case, whatever you can fit into your budget, keep increasing it. Because remember, this is not money that's wasted. This is food that you are going to buy anyway, that you are going to eat anyway. You're just getting it ahead of schedule. And of course, certain items that are perishable or things like that, you're only going to be able to get them so far ahead of schedule unless you come up with ways for preserving them or making your own.
Storing them.
Yeah, or making your own. That's just a quick sketch of the idea. It's simple, isn't it?
It is very, very simple. It's very simple, and it works. It really does. We're actually, like I mentioned earlier, we're actually going to go through and do this whole process again, only this time, instead of doing it all out on paper, like I did the first time, we're going to actually use a spreadsheet. So that way I won't have to write it all up again. It'll already be there, and then I can just go in and tweak the numbers in several years when our kids are teenagers and consuming twice as much food as they do now. I can just go in and just easily tweak numbers, and it'll be so much easier. I'm so excited. But yeah, our kids are eating a lot more than they did when they were toddlers and babies. And so that's the reason why we need to do this again, besides the fact that we have used our food storage as an emergency fund a number of times when financially we just didn't have the extra, or prices of stuff just went crazy high and I just wasn't willing to pay that for whatever it was, especially when I knew I had plenty. And so, yeah, we've kind of eaten away at our food storage plan, and we've got to
last year.
In the last year or two.
We were speaking from experience. You know, that wasn't just theory where we were talking about your food storage being an emergency fund. We had to implement
to do that
ourselves. for portions of last year. So it's awesome. It's a living thing. You know, it's not just this static 1 year or whatever supply that just sits there. This is a constantly moving thing, and it's growing and shrinking and all of that.
And I'm not always stuck on just my 2-week menu and rotating through it. In fact, I'm terrible at doing menus, honestly. So it's not something that I stick to like glue. It would be good if I did, but I don't. I like to try new things. I like to do things, change things up. And so, yeah, the 2-week menu is just something I used as a structure point to help me calculate how much food we eat in a year.
Right,
So
it's just a guideline so that you have something to work with, something to plan with, but then you can fix up odd meals or other meals and eat other stuff whenever you want to. This is just giving you an idea of what you need for the foods that you typically eat.
Yep,
Simple.
it is
Well,
simple. I love simple.
Anyhow, that's what we're going to be starting to work on starting tomorrow
In the Ready Life.
Accelerator. So if you want to join us, there's still time and you won't have missed a thing. You can hop in and be part of the Food Storage Planning Accelerator, and just go to thereadylife.com/academy, thereadylife.com/academy, and you can get in on this exciting accelerator. We're really excited to work with everybody and work through the kinks, because you know, when you're implementing something new like this, there's always going to be kinks that you got to work through, and it'll be great to compare notes with everybody, and everybody brings different experience to the table, and we can all learn from each other.
That's right.
We'd love to have you join us there. But I hope this has been helpful in just a simple but in some cases revolutionary approach to food storage, and it's an important concept and something that we really have learned to appreciate, and we hope you do too.
So go to thereadylife.com/academy and get signed up, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Hopefully, and we'll see you on the podcast next week. Bye now.
Bye.